All right, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into an absolutely massive clash between two towering figures in American culture and politics. Seriously, this feud has completely taken over timelines everywhere. On one side, you have the undisputed king of the podcasting world. On the other, the governor of the largest state in the U.S., a guy with undeniable national political ambitions. It's this fascinating collision of alternative media and traditional political power. So we're going to objectively look at the source material to figure out exactly how this rivalry ignited, what their specific arguments are, and what it reveals about the current media landscape.
So you gotta wonder, why on earth is the world's most popular podcaster openly warring with a high-profile governor? To answer that, we're gonna play neutral referee today. Let's deconstruct the specific arguments, the data points, and the very personal grievances fueling this battle using the original source material as our guide.
Okay, moving right along to Section 1, the podcaster versus politician.
First up, let's look at who is actually stepping into the ring here. This isn't just your standard internet beef, right? This is a clash of two very different types of power. On one side, we have Joe Rogan. The source material points out that no matter what metrics you use, Rogan commands the biggest podcast in the world. He wields this massive, raw, unstructured cultural dominance right from his home base in Texas. Facing him is Gavin Newsom, representing institutional, highly structured, narrative-driven political authority and commanding the massive state apparatus of California. Basically, it's raw cultural reach versus established executive power.
Which brings us to Section 2, Origins of the Bad Blood.
So how did we actually get here? This didn't just pop up out of nowhere on social media. The source material traces Rogan's timeline to explain just how deep this rift goes. Before 2020, Rogan was deeply embedded in California. He literally loved it. His roots were all in the Hollywood entertainment industry, from stand-up comedy to TV hosting. But 2020 changed absolutely everything. The analysis outlines how Rogan felt fundamentally forced to flee his home state due to what the commentary describes as the governor's pandemic tyranny. Moving his family and his massive business to Texas wasn't just a relocation, it was an exodus that totally soured Rogan on California's leadership. And the source lays out his specific, really visceral grievances. For Rogan, these weren't just abstract policy debates. They were fundamental violations of personal freedom. We're talking about the push to mandate vaccines for children, which he argues was completely unnecessary, the strict lockdowns that closed beaches and playgrounds, and what Rogan saw as glaring hypocrisy. He specifically points to that infamous incident where Governor Newsom was caught dining out in public without a mask while his entire state was under strict mandates.
All right, on to Section 3, the social media skirmish.
Fast forward to today, and boom, this simmering tension just explodes for the whole world to see. The spark? A highly combative strategy from the governor's team. Newsom's press office actually goes on X and posts, quote, "Joe Little Guy Rogan is too chicken to have me on his failing podcast because he'd know I'd crush him. All talk, no action." Now, the source analysis emphasizes that this wasn't just some intern going rogue. The material claims this was a deliberate signed-off attack by Newsom himself, using a surprisingly insulting troll-like strategy just to bait Rogan.
Well, Rogan obviously wasn't going to let that slide. He retaliates on air, and his response shows a complete lack of respect for Newsom's authenticity. He fires back, calling him a, quote, cardboard cutout of a person. The guy's an expletive con man. Rogan basically argues that unlike other polarizing figures out there, where at least you can recognize them as genuine human beings, Newsom just comes across as a heavily constructed, narrative-driven politician with absolutely no core sincerity. And here's where the source points out some serious irony. Right after his team throws out that chicken insult online, Newsom literally goes on CNN to act completely bewildered that he didn't get a polite podcast invite. He complained that Rogan didn't have the common courtesy to invite him on for a civil dialogue. There is a pretty obvious disconnect there between throwing cheap shots on social media and then complaining about a lack of courtesy on cable news.
Let's pivot now to Section 4, the California Exodus argument.
The source analysis hits us with a rapid-fire list of arguments used to paint California as a failing state under Newsom's leadership. The specific metrics they cite are pretty intense, claiming California ranks #1 in homelessness and poverty, #1 in retail crime, on top of crippling budget deficits, sky-high taxes, and the lingering economic damage from those severe COVID business and school shutdowns. These are the explicit points Rogan and his supporters use to argue that Newsom's governance is objectively failing. To put this all into perspective, the analysis brings up some U-Haul migration data. According to the Growth Index, Texas sits right at #1 for inbound growth, followed by Florida at #2. And California? Dead last at rank number 50. The source frames this as the ultimate proof, showing that people are actively fleeing blue state policies for red state growth, which heavily validates Rogan's own personal move to Texas.
The source also highlights a specific incident with an independent reporter named Nick Shirley to really hammer home Rogan's view of the governor's priorities. Shirley was reportedly uncovering massive, multi-million-dollar fraud in California. But according to Rogan, instead of Newsom opening investigations into this corruption, his office allegedly prioritized creating fake internet memes to mock the reporter. For Rogan, it's proof they care way more about optics and hiding flaws than actually fixing the state's very real problems.
And finally, Section 5, why the interview won't happen. So with all these accusations flying back and forth, it raises the ultimate question. Are we ever going to see these two massive figures actually sit down face-to-face in the studio? That is the million-dollar question both political commentators and millions of fans are waiting to see resolved. According to Rogan, the answer right now is a definitive no. And he explains exactly why, saying, quote, this is such a bad look, such a bad choice. There's a little desperation in it. He actually claims strategically he probably would have had Newsom on the podcast eventually, but he believes that combative, name-calling Twitter strategy completely backfired. It signaled a desperation that just instantly killed any interest Rogan had in extending an invite.
And the commentary points out how Rogan completely dismisses Newsom as an opponent. Whenever Newsom is confronted with the state's failures, he usually pivots to rehearsed talking points like boasting about California having the most Fortune 500 companies or top-tier higher education. Rogan totally rejects this defense. He argues California has always had those things way before Newsom ever took office, simply because it has perfect weather and a beautiful coastline. He attributes the state's historical success entirely to its geography, arguing it literally has nothing to do with Newsom's political leadership.
So what does this whole permanent standoff actually tell us? You've got a governor eager for a massive national platform, yet totally unable to secure it because he fundamentally misread how to play the modern decentralized media game. Meanwhile, a single podcaster holds enough independent cultural power to just deny a powerful politician access, largely based on a deeply personal reaction to state policy. It really makes you wonder, how is the balance of power shifting between alternative media influence and traditional political ambition? It's a fascinating dynamic that goes way beyond just two guys. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today. Let me know what you think about all this, and I'll catch you in the next one.